I know some people can't make it today. I think Sasha and Sharice will just be watching. We're not going to do a class, but that's fine. Demi G is not here. Elena and Sasha not here either. Okay, is that everybody? Not sure. Okay, I'm going to get started anyway. Okay, so welcome to your second session on Vinyasa. This is the first time that I'm doing this module for Catherine. So we had a brief discussion about what she wanted me to do, and we are going to just see how we go because I haven't done this part of the module before. But basically, it's going to be a breakdown on sequencing, but not the way that Catherine teaches you. So not intelligent sequencing. I'm going to tell you how I sequence my classes and give you some clues and some indications about how to structure your classes. We'll look at some transitions. I might ask you guys to try and come up with a little transition or two yourselves if you can. We're not going to do another whole Vinyasa class. We don't need to do that. We've done one already. So we are just going to see how we go. I just have a PowerPoint that I would like to share. So I just want to show you a couple of things that I missed out last week. Share. Okay. All right. So let's just go to show. Okay, so some of this, we would have gone through some of this last week. We would have gone through a lot of this last week. This is the vinyasa that I was talking to you guys about when I said to you, when a teacher tells you to cue a vinyasa, it consists of these three poses: your chaturanga, your upward facing dog, and your downward facing dog. Okay, just to make it a little bit clear if anybody was unsure. I've told you about the different types of yoga. Told you about power yoga. Okay, let's just get on to the. Okay. These are I don't think I showed you this last week. These are 28 common vinyasa poses. So these poses you will see a lot of in class. Okay. If you think about the yoga practice, we don't have an unlimited amount of yoga poses. We basically are all teaching the same poses, but we're trying to structure it in a different way each time to make it interesting, to make it fun, and just to find a way to move between the shapes and the poses, which is different to the way somebody else is teaching it. But we don't have an unlimited amount of poses. Okay, there are only so many yoga poses unless you want to make up something, which is probably not a good idea. So we have a very limited amount with which we need to work. Okay. So there are just some pictures of modern Vinyasa yoga common poses. There's a couple of, I don't know, some of them are, there's runner's lunge, there's cat and cow, there's airplane, there's crow, reverse your warrior, thread the needle, side plank skandasana, knee to nose, which we do 3-legged dogs, knee to nose. There's a little twisted pigeon, which is quite interesting on the right-hand side, the lady in the purple. So there's a little mermaid right at the bottom right-hand corner. So basically, these are some of the most common poses that you will see in a vinyasa class. There's a little star as well. We did star to horse in our class last week. High crescent lunge is very common. Runner's lunge is common. So basically, you will see a lot of those poses in a modern vinyasa class. Okay. Told you about the peak poses. I mentioned Jenny Rawlins. Okay, I did all of these with you last week. I just want to get to, sorry. Okay, so these are the common transitions that I was talking about, which is traditionally how people sequence. So Malasana to crow is a common way of getting into that arm balance. You see that very often. Twisted chair to side crow. Okay, I want you to see what the poses. I want you to see how we get from one pose to the other. So twisted chair to side crow or Parsva is also a very common transition. It's an easy way to get into side crow from your twisted chair because you're twisted already and then you just need to get into your arm balance. Okay. You can take a twisted lunge to side crow. Obviously, we wouldn't start, that's just an example of starting from the floor, but you would start from the second picture, step the feet together, and then, or even from the second picture, and then get into a twisted lunge to not side crow. Actually, that's not side crow. That's more Ekapada Kundaliniasana. So it's not side crow. So just that's wrong, guys. I'll have to change that slide. It's not side crow that you're getting into. It's your Ekapada Kundaliniasana, your hurdless pose, which is what that lady is doing at the end. Okay, so that's also a common transition to get into that pose. Chair to Navasana is very common. You start in a chair and you sit all the way down and then find Navasana. That's very common. And then also from here, you can roly-poly backwards and forwards along the length of the mat and land back in a chair pose. So you can come out of your boat pose doing that transition or that movement. Extended side angle to birds of paradise, I told you about last week, but if you weren't sure, this is also very, very commonly seen in vinyasa classes. And sometimes if you offer the bind an extended side angle, like the lady on the left-hand side has got, some people won't even wait for you to cue birds of paradise. They will just go into it because people with nice flexy hamstrings and open shoulders and long arms that can bind easily like doing birds of paradise. For some of the other people like myself, tight hamstrings, short arms, it's difficult for me to bind. Bird of paradise is not my favorite, so I would probably just stay in extended side angle with a half bind or a bind, but that is an option to go into birds of paradise. Triangle to half moon, very, very common. You can also take the last pose, which is Chapasana, where you bend the top leg and hold the foot. So that's very commonly used. It's a comfortable transition. Triangle to half moon is very comfortable. You're basically halfway there already. You've just got to lift the back leg up and he has, this is Baron Baptista, he's got a little half bind with his top arm, but you could extend that arm up towards the ceiling, obviously, for your full half moon, your Ardha Chandrasana. Okay. Forearm plank to dolphin, very common. Okay. Standing splits to handstand, also very common. We do a lot of, if I'm doing standing splits a lot in a class, then I might get them to hold standing splits, and then I will get them or offer a choice for them to go up into a handstand or not. And then you'll have a few people who will try it out. If I can see somebody is quite strong in their shoulders and they can almost hold a handstand, I will go and spot them and help them get up into the handstand because it's quite quick. So that you can do in a class as well. But I obviously won't do that if I can see somebody struggling to get onto their hands into a handstand. I'm not going to go and spot them and try and hold their legs up if they can't do 99% of it on their own. Okay, so you just need to watch the people in your class and just judge which ones you can spot and maybe stand behind and hold, and which ones you can't. Okay, we've done the yoga music. Okay, so that was what I wanted to show you. Okay, so that's basically your transitions. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to break down how I would sequence a class And I think this is how most teacher trainings will teach you how to sequence a class. And I'm not talking about Catherine's teaching. I'm talking about if you did teaching at Unraveled Yoga or Yoga Life or anywhere else. It's basically the same sort of system to get yourself to sequence a class. So just give me a second. I just want to go onto something that I have on my phone that I wrote down yesterday, just as a little reminder. Okay, so you have a few sections in your sequencing. Okay, you have something that is the beginning section. This is where you are, the first part of your flow. You are starting in some sort of a meditation. You are setting the scene for the meditation. You are allowing people to drop into the space, to drop into their bodies, to connect to their breath. So it's a quiet, soft, gentle way of starting. I'm going to give you some examples of poses that you can start in, okay? Most common one that you can start in is, you can start in Shavasana, lying down on your back. You can start in child's pose, very common, okay? You can start in a Sukhasana, easy seat. You can start in Supta Baddha Konasana, where people are lying down on their backs and they've got the soles of the feet touching. You would probably use that shape to start off a class if you were going to do a lot of hip opening, because obviously with the knees out towards the side, the hips, it is a little bit of a hip opening pose. You could also start lying down on your tummy in a pose called crocodile or makrasana. Okay. I have seen one class that was taught where the teacher had us lying on our sides in sort of a fetal shape. I didn't find that so comfortable, but that was just me. But I've only ever seen one teacher do that. So generally you want to start off very, very soft. You don't generally start in something like a high plank or a high mountain. You are setting your intention for the practice. You're setting the meditation. You're giving people a chance just to switch off and to arrive, because sometimes people have rushed to the studio. They've got lots of stuff on their minds. And the most important part of yoga is obviously the breath and the meditation. So you want to start off by giving them time to find that and to settle. So that will take about, I normally give it about a good 5 minutes, sometimes a little bit longer. Okay. So you then have your movements that you can do from those starting poses to slowly ease the body into movements before you start to build into bigger movements. Okay, so say you were starting, and you can write some of this down because it'll give you clues as how you can sequence. Say you were starting in a child's pose. From child's pose, you can come onto your hands and your knees into a tabletop. You can do a few rounds of cat and cow, starting to teach synchronization of the breath. So inhale is your cow pose, exhale is your cat, getting the people to breathe, getting the feeling of matching one breath, one movement. So you could do a few rounds of cat and cow. You could also do, from your tabletop, you could do thread the needle to open up into the shoulders. So you could take a little thread the needle pose if you wanted to. You could move into something a little bit stronger like bird dog. I don't know if you know what that is, but you take your one leg behind you. Does everyone know what bird dog is? No. Okay, one person knows. Hang on, let me just see if anybody else knows. Okay, I'm going to show you then. Let me show you, because it's quite a nice start to the class. Okay, so child's pose, tabletop, cat and cow, if you like, thread the needle. I'm sure you all know thread the needle is this one where you lower down and maybe open up into the shoulder. Okay, your bird dog is where you extend the one leg back and then the opposite arm forward, like a cross-body balance. And then you can do knee to nose. You can pull in knee to nose, which is really soft and comfortable. And it's just getting the movement of extending the leg out and back, almost like you would do in a three-legged dog, knee to nose, except basically you're doing it on the floor. Okay, so it's quite a nice starting pose to do. A supported side plank is also easy. Supported means that your bottom leg is on the floor. So you could do a supported side plank, just getting the sense of loading a little bit more weight on one arm. So nothing too strenuous, very soft, very simple poses, maybe examples of poses that you're going to be doing in bigger ways later on. But it's more about setting the intention for some of the movements that you may bring in later on. But basically, very slow movements to warm up the body, to ease people into bigger movements. So you don't just dive straight into a Skandasana, for example. Okay. So that is how you would start from a child's pose. Okay, if you were starting in an easy seat, Sukhasana, it's nice to do a little seated twist. It's nice to do a forward fold, walk the hands forward and fold over your legs. Okay, so I'll show you. Little seated twist, little spinal seated twist is nice to start from your easy seat. A forward fold always feels really good, but let them keep it nice and soft. You could do side bends from your easy seat, really nice and slow to warm up. You could do maybe eagle arms if you wanted to do something with the arms and they don't have to worry about eagle legs. They can just focus on the arms and open up the shoulders. So that's also quite nice to do. You can also, if you want a little bit more, come into Navasana, boat pose, but I always make it soft in the beginning. So I let them bend their knees and maybe hands to the floor, little lift of the chest. So I'm not really working anything, but it is a movement that you can bring in from your Sukhasana easy seat. Just always remember as well that if you take like a side bend to the one side and maybe a vertical twist or a twist to the one side, it's always a good idea to cross the shins out. So I like to tell people to lean backwards and then cross the shins out, and then you do the same thing on the other side. So you just remember to swap the legs, because remember, we're always trying to work symmetrically as possible. So what we do on the one side of the body, we always like to do on the other. So just remember, if you've got legs crossed, that you need to just swap it out and do the opposite way as well. Okay. So that's how you could start from your easy seat. Makrasana, lying down on your tummy, your crocodile pose, is a really good way to move into some very gentle back bends. So I like to start if I'm building up into a class which has a lot of back bends, I like to start in Makrasana, because from there, I'll show you. So Makrasana is lying down on your tummy. You can offer the option to take the feet out wide, or you can offer the option to have the feet together. So generally, it's like this. Your forehead is on your forearms. From here, it's really easy to take a few rounds of cobra because you're on the belly as well. So that's a nice way to warm up. And it's really nice to come into a little sphinx pose. Just as a soft, gentle warm up for maybe bigger back bends that you're going to be working on later on. Okay. So it's quite a nice place to start. And then from here, I generally let them go back into a child's pose, because it's really difficult to get from the tummy sort of off the floor into any other shape. Hold on a second for me, guys. I'll put the lights on. So I like to maybe go from Makrasana, crocodile, a couple of gentle back bends into child's pose, and then from there we can move into cat and cow or whatever and come into downward facing dog. Okay. Supta Baddha Konasana, soles of the feet touching. I like to mimic that shape. So maybe a little happy baby, because you've got the same sort of shape. So knees together, a little happy baby is always nice. Half happy baby, or you can, seeing as if you're working into hip openers, you can do some supine figure 4 stretching. Okay, do you know what that is, guys? Okay, you're lying down on your back. I'll show you. So I would generally ask them to close the legs, bring the knees to the chest, and then figure 4. So figure 4 your legs and then pull the legs in towards you, which is quite nice, because then you're opening up into the hips. So think about, if your class is based on hip opening, what can I do from those starting poses that is going to help open up the joints that need to be opened up, but is still going to be soft and gentle, so I'm not throwing people into big moves in the beginning. Okay. Shavasana, well, you can do basically anything from Shavasana. Lying down in Shavasana, pull the knees into the chest. You can start off with a wind removing pose with a little twist, lying down. I'll show you guys so that you know. So Shavasana, knees to your chest, or rather one leg into your chest, little wind removing pose. Either pull the knee towards the midline or take it out towards the armpit again if you want a little bit more of a hip opener. You can take it over to a very gentle twist as well. So that's quite a nice way to start. Okay, coming up from lying down is always tricky. The most common way is to roll backwards and forwards a couple of times along the length of your mat. Okay, so that's what you would find in a vinyasa class. And then you could tell people to roll over their feet and come into a tabletop, and then you could bring in some of those other movements that I mentioned. Okay, so if you choose to lie down on your back, the easiest way or the most common way of getting people to get to into tabletop is those roly-polies backwards and forwards along the length of your mat. Okay, and that is taught quite often. I'm trying to think if there is any. Okay, so I mentioned how you would start an easy seat, Supta Baddha Konasana, Shavasana, Makrasana, Child's Pose. I think that is, I can't think of any other shape that has been used to start a class. Can you guys think of anything that you may have seen before that was a little bit different or unusual? Or is that basically, if you've been doing Vinyasa, is that basically the kind of starting poses that you've been exposed to and that you've seen? Yep. Okay, can anybody think of anything? I know that one class was trying out a yoga teacher, and he started the class in high plank, which didn't go down very well. And he obviously, I don't think he got the job, because to start in high plank is quite hectic. Okay, you want to get people to load weights slowly. You don't want to just throw them into something like a high plank. So it's quite nice to just get them to, that's why hands on tabletop is quite nice, because you're already starting to load a little bit of weights in the hands and the joints. So you just start to build up into the bigger poses slowly, so that the body and the joints and everything are ready for it. Okay, you can also do some wrist exercises from your child's pose. You can get them to turn their hands the opposite way and rock backwards and forwards. If you're going to be doing arm balances and you want their wrists to be nice and open, you can just get them to rock backwards and forwards a few times, anything that feels good. Another way that you can start is a kneeling seat. Left that one out. You can start in Virasana, kneeling seats. Just remember, this might not be comfortable for people's knees. If it's not comfortable, you can offer to put a block underneath the sitting bones, or tell them to put a block underneath the sitting bones. Or if that's still not comfortable, because some people cannot sit like this, and remember, you're going to be here for about 5 minutes. It's your starting shape. Then I would just tell people to sit in a cross-legged position. Okay. From your kneeling seat, you can do little side bends as well. You can do little vertical twists, just nice and slow. You can interlace the hands and maybe move through some cat and cow movements with the body. So sort of this kind of thing, just rounding through the spine. You can interlace the hands and pull the arms down to open the shoulders. So just think about gentle movements that you can use to warm up the body. So your kneeling seat is another way of starting a practice. And that's also quite a common way to start. If people are uncomfortable, let them sit cross-legged. You have to give them the option, because some people can't stand that shape. It's very difficult on their knees. Okay. So, any questions?
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Who's that? Caroline?
Caroline, yeah.
Yes. I can't see, but I can hear. Yes, Caroline. There, I can see now.
Sorry, it's very bright. I was wondering whether you could start with Sun A or maybe a moon salutation to begin in Vinyasa. Like, would you do that?
I would bring that in to the next part. So your first part has to always be something quite slow, and then for your second part you could bring in a moon salutation or your sun salutations. Yes. Okay, but I wouldn't start with that. I would start off in one of those poses that I mentioned, and basically just give the people a chance to feel out some movement, and most importantly, to get them to start to synchronize breath with movement. Okay, because a lot of them don't remember to breathe, and it's a good place to start to integrate that into the practice. Okay. Any other questions about starting poses, or where you can go, or how you can move from there, or what you can do in your starting poses? Okay. There are a whole host of other things, but if we have to go into all of them, we'll be here all day. So I can leave it up to you guys to think of different ways that you could maybe move. I'm just going to have a look at what I wrote down yesterday and see if there's anything that I've forgotten, but I don't think so. Breath easing. Yep, and you could offer quite a bit of cues in those starting poses. You know, cues about setting intention, cues about maybe how to breathe, maybe bringing in that Ujjayi pranayama, victorious breath. You could even bring in a breathing exercise or a pranayama into one of those starting poses. You could do Nadi Shodhana if you're in a kneeling seat. You could do square breathing. So you could it's a good place to bring in maybe a different type of pranayama as well to start your practice. So you could bring some kind of different breath work into some of those beginning poses. Okay. Kapalabhati breathing as well. Kapalabhati breathing, I don't know if you've been taught that, but that's very energetic. So you could bring that in if you wanted to start off with a little bit more fire and energy in your practice. So it doesn't always have to be Ujjayi breath. That's the one that you use when you're moving, obviously through the class, but you could always bring in some kind of breath into your starting poses. Okay. All right. So that is basically how you would start a practice. Give people time to settle into their bodies, to start to move the joints, to start to move the blood around the body, just to get a feeling. And they can also start to work out and feel, okay, my wrists don't feel so great today. Maybe I need to modify. Or my shoulders don't feel so great today. So maybe I'll need to modify. And hopefully people that have been doing a lot of yoga will know how to modify. If they don't, then you probably will need to give some modifications. But it's a good chance for people just to suss out their own bodies and how they're feeling. Okay, because every single day that you show up to your mat is different. Okay, some days your shoulders feel strong, some days they feel terrible, some days your wrists don't feel that great. So it just gives people time to just feel out where they may need to just modify or back off a little bit in their practice. Okay. The second part of your sequencing is slowly starting to build a little bit more heat in the body. So this could be your sun salutations A. I'll always start sun salutation A, not sun salutation B. It could be your sun A's that you can bring in. It could be, like Caroline mentioned, a moon salutation. If you don't know what that is, go and have a look what it is. It's a very soft way of building up heat in the body. It would normally or quite commonly involve lunges with your back knee down so that you're not you're not upright yet. So things like your crescent moon or your Anjanasana. Does everybody know what that is? Okay, anybody that doesn't know what that is? Let me just have to move the screen. Okay, all right, so your Anjanasana, your very low lunges, your downward facing dog, getting a feeling of downward facing dog. It might even be downward facing dog, shifting to high plank and backwards a few times. Just again, getting people to load a little bit more weight into the arms, the shoulders, the wrists. If you're doing a sun A, please do the first one gently. In other words, your first sun A, I don't do the first sun A with a chaturanga. I do the first sun A, lowering to the tummy and doing 3 rounds of cobra first. Second time round, I will give people the option to take a chaturanga. So I don't just dive into the first sun A with a chaturanga. Off you go, guys. Let's go. Okay. So make your first sun A a little bit soft, a little bit gentle, and quite slow so people can feel it out. If you want to do 2 sun A's, lowering down and doing cobra first, you can. Okay, so just very, very slowly getting people used to that flow, getting people used to that idea of what that vinyasa means. Remember those 3 different poses? Your chaturanga, your upward facing dog, and your downward facing dog. If people are not doing chaturanga, they're going to lower down to the tummy and they're going to do cobra. Then they're going to do cobra to downward facing dog. Okay, so that is always an option because I don't know if you know, you probably do know this, but people, well, you would know because chaturanga is a very, very difficult pose. It's not easy. So a lot of people won't be able to do a low plank. They will have to lower onto their tummies, and you can always give them the option of using the knees to do that. Okay, so start off very slowly, lots of low lunges, very slow sun salutation A's. But this is basically where you are building a little bit of heat and you are easing into sort of an idea of maybe what is going to come next in your sequencing. Not a lot of twisting. You can do gentle vertical twists, but I wouldn't go for anything too hectic here. So I would just do a vertical twist in an Anjanasana. I wouldn't get into anything like your chair twists like this until I've done a few like this one. That's quite deep twisting. So I wouldn't get into that sort of thing just yet. I would start off with your Anjanasanas very slowly, maybe a little twist. I mean, this is not a hell of a twist. Very gentle back bend, maybe a little cactus of the arms open, or you can press the hands together and lean into a little back bend. So just bringing in different types of movements, but they're on a much smaller scale than what you would do if you were building into the bigger or the main part of your sequence. Okay. So sun salutation A and sun salutation B are very much a part of that. Let me just see what else I said. Okay. You could also start to get a little bit of opening for the hamstrings with a Anjanasana to half splits. Okay. Because if you want to open up the hamstrings, I wouldn't dive straight into something like Skandasana. So you find ways to gently open up parts of the body first. So half splits is commonly used in the beginning just to get that stretch into the back of the legs, so that you don't dive straight into something like, I don't even know what's even more Skandasana or Prasarita, or something that's really going to stretch the back of the legs and the hamstrings a little bit more. Okay. So that is your sort of your second part, and you can flow through sun A. Sun B obviously brings in your chair pose. So that's building a little bit more heat. Chair pose is so good for the legs, starts to build a lot of heat in the quads and the legs. So after you've done maybe 2 or 3 rounds of sun A, bring in a sun salutation, bring in a few rounds of sun salutations B, because that is a little bit stronger for the legs. Okay, when I say sun B, I wouldn't add in warrior 1 here, because your sun salutation B is normally warrior 1 included. I would just keep it a general vinyasa. So instead of high mountain, I would do chair pose. Okay, and then forward fold, and then vinyasa back to downward facing dog. Okay. Always a good idea to include downward facing dog in the very beginning of your practice, because that is what people are going to be holding very, very often. Give lots of verbal cues in downward facing dog so that people can feel it out and get it correct, because it is very, very common. And it's also a pose that is done correctly a lot of the time. So after my sort of warm up, the cat and cow that I've done in the knees, or a bird dog or whatever, I generally get people into downward facing dog so that they can start to feel, once again, you're loading a little bit more weight in the hands, the arms, the shoulders. Maybe getting them to rock forwards and backwards to high plank, so they're loading even more weight into the shoulders, but just very smoothly starting to get that, oh, hang on a sec. Sorry, what happened now? Starting to get that idea of what it feels like to be in a downward facing dog. What are the cues? Generally, the first downward facing dog give quite a lot of cues to try and get people to get it correct. And if I need to physically adjust, then I will. Any questions about the second part of your flow? Remember, it's all about building up a flow. Okay.
Sorry, babe.
Any questions? Any questions? No. Okay. Good.
Sorry, I'm late.
Oh, don't worry, that's fine. No problem at all. Not a problem at all. Welcome. Okay. Then you would start to build up into your flow. And the thing about a vinyasa practice is that you build up into a flow, but you repeat in the flow. You repeat the same postures a few times so that people can feel it out. So I don't do one flow and then change it up and do a whole different flow and then change it up and do something completely different. You keep the flow generally the same so that some of the movements or most of the movements are the same so that people can feel it out. And then you can make it more difficult with subsequent flows by adding things on from where you are. So when you start to build the flow, you can start to bring in something like your warrior one, your warrior flows, your warrior, reverse your warrior, that kind of thing. It's basically a layering of the larger postures and just getting people into the rhythm of the flow. Okay, so how they're going to be moving through your flow, and sort of maybe quite a bit of you can cue. I like to, the first flow I probably cue a lot more and then I do the subsequent flows because we're going to be doing probably the same kind of things in subsequent flows. Okay, so you're going to keep the same movement so people can feel it. So generally I start off and I say, right, we're going to start our flow. We'll do the first one slowly. So we do the first flow, whatever it is, how I'm building up to it, whatever I'm doing, we do the first one slowly, right side, left side, and then we do it a little bit quicker. Remember, we don't want to be moving at such a fast pace that people can't get into the poses properly. So then I would start to make the flow a little bit quicker, but I would start to bring in different things. So for example, if I have a high crescent lunge, I could start to bring in a vertical twist. I could start to bring in a little back bend. Okay, so I'm adding things on slowly as we move along. Okay, if I'm adding in aeroplane, okay, so I could get people to, if I have an aeroplane in my first little flow somewhere along the line, if I wanted to make it a little bit hard, I could get them to reach their arms forward into warrior 3. So think about how you can take whatever poses you have built into your first flow, how you can replicate those poses, and then how you can, I normally do the same flow probably twice, and then I start to add things on. And then what can I add on that's going to basically be the same, but then how can I move from there maybe into bigger poses? So how can I move from my first flow or my second flow? How can I then move into my, if I'm bringing in a warrior flow, how do I get there? How do I move into, how do I transition? Also adding transitions in as you're going along. If I want to change direction, if I want to move to the back of the mat, how can I do that? What transitions can I use to do that if I want to get people to move around their mats in a bigger way? Okay, and it is important to repeat the postures because the first time people come into a one-legged balance, it's not going to be easy. They're going to fall out. They're going to battle. The second time they come into it, they're going to feel better because it probably will feel a bit more stable and a bit more easier. If you're bringing it in the third time around, fantastic. It's going to feel much, much, much better, much easier for them. So it's a good idea to repeat the postures, repeat the flow. I don't know if Catherine has mentioned that, but that is basically what I would suggest. Okay. Let me just see what else I wrote down. Sorry, guys, I made some notes yesterday. Let's just see what else I said yesterday. Okay, so, yep. So you're just building the flow, starting to create. Also, you just want to keep remember the cueing of the inhalation and the exhalation. You always cue breath in a vinyasa class. If you don't, people don't breathe or they get it wrong. So you're always saying inhale, high mountain, exhale, forward fold, the other way around. High mountain, inhale, forward fold, exhale. However you're cueing the breath, you cue the breath all the way along. Okay. I sometimes might not do that in the third flow, because by then people know the breath, hopefully, and I'll leave the breath cueing out, maybe just for one flow. But the rest of the time you're cueing flows, you're cueing breath all the time. So you can start in that building up of that flow. You can start to bring in your one-legged balances. You can start to bring in your high crescent lunge instead of a low lunge. So now they're working the legs a little bit more. You can start to bring in bigger twists. You can start to bring in your prayer twist. You can start to bring in a crescent twist. You can start to just build a little bit more into that flow. And remember, you want to try and have poses that probably mimic or lead towards whatever you're teaching towards the end, even if it's something as simple as dancer's pose. What can I bring in that mimics dancer's pose somewhere along the line, so that when we get to dances, we've sort of opened up the body? So I'll give you an example of that just now. And also, just, I mean, whatever if you're moving towards splits, let's just say, as sort of a peak pose at the end, you'll do a lot of half splits, you'll do a lot of skandasana, you'll do a lot of getting the hamstrings nice and open and the hip flexors stretched. So a lot of low lunges to stretch the hip flexors, so the hip flexors need to be open as well. So just think about how you can use poses to mimic to get towards your whatever you're teaching. It might not be a peak pose. Your peak pose might just be splits, and people who can do it, and people who can't, don't. Okay. So for I wonder if I should tell you this, or if I should let you do this. Actually, no, I'm going to give you this as an exercise to do. I'm not. Okay. When you have done your building your flow, so that will probably maybe be 2 or 3 rounds of flows, depending on how long they are. Obviously, if they're longer, you'll only be able to do 2 flows. If it's a shorter flow, you'll be able to do 3. You then come into your peak pose, or whatever it is that you're working towards, even if it's something like bakasana or crow. Okay. Or if it's revolved half moon or half moon. Half moon is a peak pose. Half moon is difficult. People battle to hold Ardha Chandrasana. Okay. And I'll give you some clues. I'll give you some clues as to poses that will mimic those peak poses, so that you can get an idea of what I'm talking about when I say we need to mimic the kind of postures that we're working towards. Okay. So you build up to your peak flow, or whatever it is that your main thing that you're going to be doing, whether it's something like half moon, revolved half moon, bakasana, maybe it's a figure 4, standing figure 4, getting people to see if they can even get their fingertips to the floor. If that's all that happens, that's fine. At least you've moved towards something. Okay, so you would obviously do a lot of figure 4. It's actually quite fun to do a figure 4 flow, because there's lots of figure 4 shapes that you can bring in, and I'll give you a few clues about that just now. So once you have done your peak pose, and you've built people up to that peak pose, okay, then you should try and do counter poses, just to balance the body. So in other words, if I have done a lot of back bending in my peak flow and my building up, come to the floor and fold standing, or I would come to the floor and do something like Paschimottanasana or some kind of forward fold, just as a counter pose. Okay. If I have done a lot of stuff for stretching the hamstrings, like Skandasana or half splits or splits, I would then try and do something that strengthens the hamstrings, like a bridge pose. Okay, because that strengthens the hamstring rather than stretching them. So even something like a bridge pose is a good way just to get those hamstrings just to work in a strength-based way, rather than stretching them like you've been doing probably or possibly most of the class. Okay. If so I always like to hang on a second, let me just see if that's what I wrote down yesterday. Yep, bridge pose is a good one to do as a counterbalance. Okay, and this is where you're starting to slow things down. So whatever your counter pose is, you're probably going to hold it for a few rounds of breath. So if I'm in Paschimottanasana, I'm not going to go in and out of it quickly. I'm going to be holding it for a few rounds of breath. If I'm in bridge pose, I'm going to be holding it for a few rounds of breath. So just giving the body a chance to start to slow down after all the physical movement, after all the breath work, and after sort of building up all that heat. You then want to calm the body down slowly. Okay, so you don't just go from your peak pose to Shavasana. Okay, there is that little gap in between where you are slowing things down, counter posing, and just getting people to just allow the heart rate to slow down. And if they've sort of lost their connection to their breath, because a lot of people do, they get out of breath and they don't take a break in child's pose because they don't feel like they want to, they don't feel like they need to, even though they do. But people don't like to take a break in child's pose because they think that they it's I don't know, it's an ego thing. So if they have lost a bit of their breath, then this counter pose at the end will give them a chance to slow down and focus on the breath again. Okay, also remember, when beginners are in your class, they are going to battle to breathe and find the poses because they don't know the names of anything. They probably won't even know what a warrior 2 is. So probably the only time that your beginners or people new to yoga are going to be breathing properly is in your beginning, maybe in your very first flow that you do, which is slow, and then in these counter poses at the end. Because when you are building up into flow, beginners are so lost. It's really difficult for them. Most of them hold their breath, or they don't breathe, or they hardly breathe, or they breathe incorrectly. So this just gives them a chance as well, just to breathe like you're supposed to breathe. Okay, nice and slowly, ujjayi breath, full inhalations, full exhalations in and out of the nose. Okay. And then you have what I like to call the surrender part of your practice, which is the last part of your flow, or not your flow, the last part of your whole sequence. It could be something like, I like to end in a supine twist. It could be, you could add wind removing pose in at the end. You could do a figure 4 stretch at the end. So something that just seals off the practice. An inversion is always nice, like legs up the wall. Okay, so I always add an inversion, maybe happy baby, and I always like to end off with a twist. So it's very, very soft. Nothing hectic, really, really allowing the body to completely start to slow down and cool down. So by the time your people land in Shavasana, they are already relaxed and starting to get the feeling of getting themselves or setting themselves up for that meditation in Shavasana. Okay, so you slow it down towards the end, give people a chance to soften, to breathe, and by the time they come into Shavasana, they should be in their Shavasana. Okay, because that is obviously, I mean, Shavasana, I like to think, is the peak pose of every single yoga class. Okay, that is the meditation. That is how you end your practice with your Shavasana. It's your time to switch off. It's your time to be with yourself. It's your time to just breathe and lie still. That's difficult for beginners. Beginners also battle to lie still in Shavasana. Okay. So let me see if there's anything else. Again, you can cue in your Shavasana and your sort of softer poses, you can cue things to remind people to relax, like relax the face, keep the gaze soft, the eyes closed, relax the jaw, relax the shoulders. So really just guiding people into that sense of relaxation so that in Shavasana, they can completely, totally relax. Okay, does anybody have any questions?
I've got a question.
Okay, who's that?
Zani.
Okay, yes, trying to find, yes. Okay.
It was about Shavasana.
Yes.
A year or so ago, when I was really struggling with back pain, Shavasana was super uncomfortable. I just didn't want to lie on my back ever. So what alternatives could you provide for Shavasana for people at the end of a practice?
Constructive rest is quite nice. Do you know constructive rest? Okay, I'll show you. Okay, so if people find it difficult to lie in Shavasana And most people take Shavasana, but if they don't, they can take constructive rest. So I'll show you from the front. So constructive rest, your knees knock together, your heels are out, your toes are in, your knees knock together. And because my knees are knocking together, there's no work for my legs at all. It's super, super comfy. You can try it out yourself. Very, very nice. And then you can maybe relax your hands on your tummy or relax them alongside. So your legs up, if you do it, you'll feel my legs are not doing anything. They're not working. I'm not working to hold them up. They're just very comfortable, very relaxed. So you could let them come into that shape. Sometimes people like to take Supta Baddha Konasana, which is fine for those people that can lie with their knees out for a long period of time, but that tends to get a little bit uncomfortable for the inner thighs and the inner groins. So if people, people with very flexy hamstrings and adductors or whatever will find it comfortable to choose Supta Baddha Konasana instead. I don't ever give the option to lie on the tummy. I have seen one person that lies on his tummy in Shavasana every single class. That's his choice. That's his option. I'm not going to tell him not to do it, but I don't give it. I don't give it as a choice. Okay. So constructive rest is a good thing. Supta Baddha Konasana is good. I don't know how comfortable it is to lie in a fetal position for so long. I still think that Shavasana is probably the best place to be. Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. Anybody else got any other questions? Yes, Caroline.
What is the bulk of each part? Like how much of, like where is the bulk of the whole sequence?
Okay.
Where would you put most of the bulk?
I would put most of it in my last flow. So you generally have your warm up, your Anjanasana, your very soft lunges. Then I normally do about 2 flows where I add things on. The third flow is the bulk. The third flow is I've built up to the peak pose. I've prepared everybody for the peak pose. We do the peak pose. So that is where the bulk of it is. When the body is warm and prepared, joints are open, whatever needs to be stretched, hamstrings I've hopefully stretched a little bit more, whatever needs to be done has been done, then I put that into the last flow. Okay, and that becomes your flow for your peak pose, or not peak pose, but well, possibly, but whatever you're working towards. Okay, anybody else have any other questions? Yes, Sharice.
I was just wondering, so obviously your whole sequence needs to fit into an hour. And
yes.
How would you make sure that you fit your sequence into an hour? How do you work that out?
Okay, that's a good question because it's quite tricky. I like to practice my sequence and then I can see if it's an hour or not. But basically you have 5 minutes for your warm-up and you have about 5 to 10, no, not even, about 7 minutes or so for your counter poses before you land in Shavasana. Okay, so that takes care of about 12 minutes. Let's just say 15 minutes of your practice. So your flow, your actual flow has to be about 45 minutes. Okay, it's tricky because if you are practicing the class yourself, you always tend to practice it a little bit quicker than you would teach it. Okay, so if I'm practicing it by myself, I don't lie in child's pose for 5 minutes. I do it a little bit quicker. So my flow is normally a little bit shorter. So I add a little bit of, I keep myself extra time because I know I'm gonna slow things down when I'm actually teaching the class. I'm gonna give them a longer time in the beginning, 5 minutes, and I'm gonna give them a nice cool down at the end. So it's really is, if you have a start for 5 minutes and an end for about 12 minutes, your flow for 45 minutes, you can possibly do 2 rounds of Sun A, maybe 2 rounds of Sun B. From there, you need to build into your flow. So you have 2 flows, and then your peak flow, which is your third flow, and then you should be done. You can't really add much more in than that. It's really a case of, it's very difficult in the beginning, I must be honest, when you first start teaching, because you really have no clue. So sometimes if my sequence is a little bit too short, then I will give them a little bit more to do on the floor at the end, because we'll have time. So we might do 3 rounds of bridge instead of 1, or we'll do 2 rounds of bridge and then we'll do a full wheel. So I sort of judge during the class. Okay, if my sequence is too short, I can give them more to do at the end. If my sequence is too long, we're going to come down to the floor and we're going to be in legs up the wall and in our twist a little bit quicker. It's tricky. It comes with practice. That's the only advice that I can give you. And the best way to do it is to practice it yourself so that you can feel it out. That is the only way. Okay. It's difficult. The timing is tricky. So that is something that you just have to feel out yourself. Practice the sequence yourself. If you are still in your sun A and your sun B and half an hour's gone already, you know, or no, I need to shorten that, or leave the sun A and sun B's out and just do my beginning flows, your very soft flow. You don't always have to add sun A and sun B in. It's just it is an option. I don't always put sun A's and sun B's into my class. Sometimes I'll do a moon salutation like Caroline mentioned, or I'll do just a lunging flow, very low lunges with a little bit of back bending and twisting, and that will be my, instead of my sun A and my sun B. Because I do find that if you put too many sun A's and sun B's in, you don't have much time and space to do very much else, because that does take up quite a bit of time. Okay, so sun A and sun B is good to warm up the body, but I wouldn't put too many of them in, and you don't always have to do that. It's just an option. Okay, very good for warming up the body, but it's not something that you absolutely have to put in. Okay, so how I'll go about sequencing or thinking about what I want to do is I might think, okay, and I'm going to give you dances pose as an example, because I want you guys to come up with some ideas. So if I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to get them, peak pose is going to be dances pose, and when we get there, we're going to hold it for 30 seconds or a minute, and that will be enough for everybody. That's what I'm going to build up to. Okay, that might be what I'm working towards. Okay, I will then think about, okay, what do I need for dancer's pose? What anatomical things do I need for dancer's pose? So dancer's pose, I need shoulder extension, because my one arm is reaching back and holding my foot. Okay, the other arm is reaching forward, so maybe I need to bring in something with a little bit of shoulder flexion. To find balancing on one leg, so I'll make sure that I bring in quite a few poses where they balance on one leg. I'm extending a leg behind me, so I will do poses where I'm extending the leg behind me, like aeroplane or standing splits. Okay, so getting that idea of the leg being extended behind you rather than forward. Okay, so a single leg Tadasana, I probably wouldn't bring too many of those in. What else? I would need to stretch the hip flexors, so I would do low lunges in the beginning. I need to get into a little bit of a back bend as well. Okay, so your dancer's pose is a little bit of a back bend too. So maybe I would bring in back bends, and maybe I would do a couple of back bends on the tummy, like cobra or something else that will mimic the pose. So I want to give you guys just a little exercise. Think about dancer's pose. Okay, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to do this. Think about dancer's pose. Think about another pose that you can use that will mimic it, or basically sort of mimic it, but you're not doing it properly. It could be, it could be something that you do on the floor. It could be something that you do standing. It could be okay, I'll give you those two options. It could be something that you do on your hands and your knees. So think about, I don't know how many poses you guys know from Vinyasa classes, but just give it a little bit of a think. And then I want you to just show me one thing that you think that you could do that could almost mimic your dancer's pose and get the body sort of prepared. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm going to give you, I'll give you about 5 to 10 minutes. So if you want to get up and feel it out and do whatever you need to do to try and think of something that will mimic the pose or almost mimic the pose, be it on the floor, on hands and knees, standing, whatever you feel. Just, I would like each of you just to give me sort of one thing that you think that you could bring in that will help people find dancer's pose a little bit easier. Okay. So you have 10 minutes to do that. Okay. So just think about it. If you get stuck, I mean, it's not the end of the world. I'm going to tell you some examples afterwards, but just use your brain a little bit and see if you can think about something that you could possibly do that would mimic your dancer's pose or help. Okay. I'll give you guys 10 minutes. And it may be something that you've done in a Vinyasa class already. Okay, it's a few more minutes, guys. Not long to go. What is the time? 22:01. We started drop this 11, half past 12. Okay. Okay, do you guys need more time or are you on it? 2 more minutes? You look like you're all done. Oh, okay. Sama, does that mean you want 2 more minutes or are you done? Okay, good. All right. Okay, so who wants to go first, or do you want me just to nominate somebody? Okay, I'm just going to start from the left-hand side of my screen. Caroline, you're the first one that I can see. So do you want to show me what you've sort of thought about?
Okay, so I have crescent moon with a back bend.
Yeah, good.
Do you want me to show you? Everyone knows.
Yes, actually show me. Yes, show me. Yeah, let's see it. Can everybody see Caroline?
Hold on. Sorry. There we go. So this
Okay.
one with the back bend.
Yes, okay. Yeah, okay, good.
And then the next one I have is Warrior 3, just because of the abduction, the hip abduction as well.
Okay, so Warrior 3, lifting the back leg up. Yep, okay.
And then I also got Mermaid.
Ah, okay, that's a good one. Yes.
Yeah, the back bend and it's the hip abduction as well.
Okay,
so
yes, that's quite a good one. Yes,
yeah.
Good. Okay, yes, well done. Okay, good. Okay, Charisse.
Aria, okay, come on. Out. Come on.
Okay, so I got Cobra for the back bend.
Okay.
And Wild Thing also for the back bend.
Good, yes, good.
Then I've got Three-Legged Down Dog for the extension of the back leg.
Okay, good.
Also for
Sorry,
the
say that again. Sorry, a three-legged dog and then?
And then a triangle.
Okay. Okay. Tell me why you would think about triangle.
For the back leg extension.
Okay, yep, okay. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Okay, good.
And then a low lunge with a little back bend.
Okay, perfect. Good. Okay, good. Okay, Karen.
I have not really a yoga move. I don't know if it is. If you're on your all fours and you lift your back leg.
Yes.
I will show
Okay, do you want to show me?
Yeah. Like this.
Yes.
Simple.
Yes. Good. Now stay there, Karen. Stay there. Go back there. Stay there. Okay. So what leg have you got lifted? Your right leg?
Yes.
Okay. So do you know tiger pose?
Do I know?
Tiger pose?
No.
Okay. Reach your left arm back and hold your foot. and kick your foot up into your hand. Hold your foot. Okay, I'll show you. So that was good. Okay, because this is quite a good one too. Okay, very good. So tiger pose is lifting the back leg up, and then you reach for the back foot. You kick the foot up, and can you see how that mimics dancer's pose, guys?
Yes.
Okay, so that's a good one to do. So well thought of, because, and even just doing that is getting that back hamstring activated. But if look, it's not the same arm and the same leg like you do in dancer's pose, okay? But you're still getting the mimicking of lifting the leg, getting the back bend, and getting that shoulder extension all at the same time. So you're actually getting quite a lot integrated all in one go. So good. Now, if you knew tiger pose, you may even have mentioned that. So that's good.
I think also we might have done it once in our first warm up with Laura. Now that you say that.
Okay,
Yeah.
Good. Okay, yes. So that's a good one, because that's almost identical, except I'm on my knees and I have opposite arm and opposite leg instead of the same arm and the same leg. Okay, so that's good. Okay.
Then I also had downward facing dog, 3-legged downward facing dog with the leg bends.
Okay, yes.
Yes, with the leg bends.
Yes.
Warrior 3 for the back, warrior 3 for the balance.
Right, good.
Also pulling the leg up from warrior 3, pulling the leg up.
Good, yes. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And standing splits.
Good, yes, perfect. Good. Okay. Good, well done.
Thank you.
Okay, Zani, is that how I say your name? Is that Zani?
Yeah, Zani, it's perfect.
Zani, okay, good.
I had a lot of similar choices to Caroline, except I wrote here bow pose because of just sort of pulling up the legs behind me.
Good, yes.
And then I had a variation of the tiger pose, which we also did with Laura, where you're actually doing a low lunge and then grabbing the back foot.
Good, yes.
But that was also quite a big stretch for the hip flexors and the quads.
Good, excellent, very good. Okay, yes, and I'm going to come back to that. What did you say? What was your back bend? You didn't say cobra. You said floor bow.
Yes.
Floor bow. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to come back to that right at the end, but that's a good one. Very good. Okay, good. Okay, next, it just says iPhone 2. I don't know who that is. There's no name there. Anyone know who that is? No. Okay, let's move on. It's sorry?
It's Eva.
Okay.
She's on her phone because her internet is down today.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, then we'll move on to Trudy.
Hi. Yeah, I also had similar to what Caroline and Zani said, but I also thought was, I know with Ardha Chandrasana, your hips are open, but you could, can you see me? If you take Ardha Chandrasana and just do the Chapasana variation,
very good.
That would also sort of have a, because then it would be the same arm and leg.
Yeah, very good. Yeah. Yes, good. Awesome. Good. Yep. Very good. Good.
Trudy, what is the English name for that pose?
Sugarcane pose.
The whole thing, but I don't know what Chapasana is.
Chapasana is sugarcane. Ardha Chandrasana is half moon, and Chapasana is called sugarcane pose. Okay. Good. Okay, awesome, guys. Brilliant. Okay, Ronelle?
Okay. So I have nothing that hasn't been mentioned yet, but what I wrote down here is 3-legged dog with a leg bend, wild thing, bow pose, up dog just to get a bit of that back bend.
Good.
Then camel, wheel, warrior 3 for the balance, and then low lunge with the back bend.
Okay, good. Okay, excellent. Okay. You said camel. Okay, the only issue I have with that is that it would be difficult to bring wheel in and then dances, because wheel is sort of more intense, and it's used sort of when you come to the floor more mostly. So it's a good one to do, but it might just be too much, if I can put it that way. A bit too strong in the middle of the flow. But it is, I mean, you've got the right idea. It's back bend and whatever. So that's, yeah. but that would be difficult. I would do the others. I would do floorboat. I would possibly do camel, and I would maybe not do full wheel. It's difficult from people to go from full wheel back into a flow to work towards dances. Okay, but that was good thinking. Okay, Zama.
I have very similar things as well. I had from downward dog to three-legged dog to pigeon to mermaid.
Okay. Okay.
And then I had a three-legged dog to a high lunge to a pyramid to a standing split to warrior three.
Good. Okay. Excellent. Good. Very good. Good. Okay. Celine. I thought you guys would battle with this, but you're not. Yay! Awesome.
I have bridge, scorpion, and then just while we're standing, like a mini Tadasana, and then king pigeon,
Yes.
and warrior three, and standing splits just before we go into.
Okay. You said, what did you say? Did you say scorpion?
Yeah.
Okay. What do you mean by the scorpion? What do you mean?
I think it's tiger's pose.
Okay.
You know, because of the tail, when you lift your back leg up and you.
Okay. So you're on your hands and your knees and you're lifting the back leg up into like a little. Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
Good. Excellent. Yes. Good. Very good. Okay. Carmel. Carmel. I don't know if you're there. Okay, Carmel is not answering. I don't know where she is. Carmel, are you there? No. Okay, and then there's iPhone 2. Is there anybody else? Is there somebody that I've missed? Ah, Helene. Yes. Okay.
So I was sort of thinking about the quad stretches a lot.
Yes.
So I was wondering if one could, at least in that initial warm up, like hero pose and then maybe a frog pose, which would give you both like the quad stretch and shoulder flexion. Or yeah, if you take it back that way, it would be shoulder extension if you hold the foot in frog pose. That would help. Sorry, sorry, I can't
my
hear you.
internet is giving me hassles. Sorry, let me just. Okay, hang on a minute. Sorry, let me just. Okay, is that better?
Yeah, now I can hear you. Okay.
So what do you mean by frog pose? Do you want to show me? Hang on, now I've lost you. I can't see you. Hang on.
Yeah, I'm just moving my computer.
Okay. Ah, yes, good. Very good. Yep. Excellent. Yes. Very good. Very good. Yes. Good. Okay. That was good. Okay. Is there anybody else that I've missed? Is that everybody? Okay. Okay, that was good, guys. That was excellent. So you all have very good idea of what you would need to do, and then you would obviously have to transition between all those things, but I'm sure that that's something that you could do. I'm going to give you 2 other examples of things that I have brought in to a dancer's flow so that you can just see. Okay, so the one I've done is I've done a window reading pose like somebody mentioned, okay? And then I've done this. I've taken the foot back and I've held the foot with both of my hands. And then I have shrugged shoulders back, so they're both an extension. And then I have asked everybody to lean forward, holding the foot. Okay, so that is a shape that I just figured out on my own, because if I just reach the other arm, whoops, I'm leaving my bands. if I just reach the other arm forward, I'm basically in a dancer's pose. Okay, so I've got them to the flow, and then I've got them to do, say we did a high crescent lunge, standing women moving pose, and then I'll say take the foot back, hold the foot with both of your hands, and then shrug shoulders, lean forward, kick the foot up. This is also very good for their balancing, because they're getting the idea of balancing on one leg. Okay, so that's something I brought in. And then also floor bow was mentioned. Okay, so floor bow, brilliant. But what if I do, instead of both legs for floor bow, what if I do one leg? What if I reach my other arm forward and then take my hand back and hold one leg? And now what if I try and lift everything off the floor? So I'm in like a prone dancers. Okay, so I've also brought that in. So it's the same sort of feeling as a dancer's pose. I'm getting that back leg to lift. I've got that the other one in a sort of in the dancer's shape. And I'm reaching the other arm forward, which I would be doing in a dancer's pose. And by lifting, I'm getting into hopefully more of a back bend. Okay, so those are other ways or other shapes that you could use. Okay, but you guys did well. So I always just try and think of something that's maybe a little bit different or whatever, but that was good. Okay, so yeah, you sort of know how to think about mimicking for peak pose. Okay. The other thing I wanted to tell you about, so that is how I would sequence. I would think about, okay, what do I want to do? Do I want to just stretch hamstrings? Then we'll do a lot of skandasana, half splits. If I'm working towards, if I want people to do handstands, stage my dogs on my computer. You can't lie on my computer. If I'm doing handstands, I'll do a lot of standing splits and maybe getting people to from a standing splits leaning. So what I would do, for example, just give you an example. If I'm doing standing splits and I want people to do handstand or work towards handstand, the second flow around, I'll get them to standing splits, but then I'll get them to lean into their hands and try and see if they can lift the toes up. So just getting them to do something that's almost a handstand but isn't. Okay, and then last flow around, by the time we get to there, I'll say, right, you either hold your standing splits or you can try and take that movement a little bit further and maybe kick up into a handstand. Okay, so it's all about just finding those poses to mimic whatever you're working towards. Okay, another way of thinking about sequences is, I think I told you this last week, but I might just have a transition, a different transition that I've thought about, or I want to bring in, or I want to basically try and bring into the flow. And then I would try and sequence around that transition. So same type of thing, mimicking things to get to that to use that transition. And I'm just going to give you one example of a transition that I like to use, but it is quite tricky. So I teach it two different ways. So the first time around I teach it, I'll show you now one way. Second time around I teach it the more difficult way. Okay, so sorry, just excuse my dog. Can you go and sit on that? Okay, so I like the transition from fallen triangle. Okay, I'm sure you guys know fallen triangle. I like the transition of stepping my back foot forward and coming into standing splits. Okay. So I would teach that first time around. I would bring it, do a flow, and then I'd land up in fallen triangle. Then I'd tell everybody for the first time to lower the right hand down, come up onto the back toes, lean forward, and then just try and step the foot forward using both of their hands. Okay. That's how I would teach it the first time. Second time around, I would then give them the option of keeping the arm up. Oopsie, I have the wrong leg. And then I would say to them, okay, so you can do it on one hand now. Basically pull the knee up and step forward into your standing splits. So I might just think about one transition and sequence basically how to get there. So I would have to also do, and if I'm doing that stepping your foot over is one-armed balance. So I would probably bring in some side planks along the way. supported side plank in the beginning, in my soft part of the flow. Side plank, because I want them to get that idea of loading on one arm. So I would try and bring in things that slowly add load so that by the time they get there, because that's quite tough to do that on one hand. Okay, so it might just be one transition that comes into my mind and I think, okay, and the rest of the flow might just be your plain old simple, whatever you're doing, sun A, sun B, warrior flows, and I might just bring that transition right in at the end. Okay, so that is how I would possibly think about sequencing a class. Sometimes it's just a transition. Trying to think of other transitions. So, because everybody knows everybody knows crow to Melasana to crow. Everybody knows triangle to half moon. So I try and think of things slightly different. I'm trying to give you another example. Oh, yes. Okay, so this is another different one. So just sometimes you just need to get onto your mat and feel it for yourself. Okay, so go on. So I'm sure everybody knows half pigeon. Okay, we normally fold forward into half pigeon and have a bit of a rest. This is often thrown in towards the end of class as a bit of a break, actually, because this is just a chance for people to rest. And most of the time, from here, it's tuck the toes, three-legged dog, open up the hip, shake out the leg, and come into down dog. That's your most common transition. Okay, so I thought, well, what can I do from here that isn't that? What can I do that's different? Okay, so I'll just give you an example. So instead of doing that, I have a look and I see that everybody can get their forearms down. So then I tell them, right, forearms to the floor and tuck the back toes. And then from here, we step into a forearm plank. Okay, just a different transition. So, and instead of doing what everybody else does, lifting the three-legged dog. So just try and think about what else can I do from this? Where can I go from here? Okay, is there anything that I can do that's different instead of doing the same as what everybody else is doing? And that's where it gets tricky. Okay, it doesn't always come naturally. Sometimes it just, you can't think of anything and that's fine. But get into the shape and think, okay, can I move somewhere differently from here? Is there anything else that I can do that will make it a little bit different? Okay. I know this all probably sounds like gibberish. And in the beginning, it is difficult. But as you do it, as you get more used to sequencing, you'll get a feeling of trying to move and transition differently to what everybody else is doing. Okay, without making it completely so complicated that nobody can do it. Okay, because you don't want that either. So half pigeon to forearm plank, I promise you people can do it because I've taught it lots of times. People can do it, they can manage it, it's fine. So you also don't want to give them something that's totally impossible that no one's going to be able to do. Okay, give you another example. I'm teaching this tomorrow, it's gone out of my head. Okay. Yeah, I like baby Hanuman. This is baby Hanuman, low lunge to baby Hanuman. And then I like to do something, maybe a little vertical twist. And then come back to this. First time round, get people to step back to a low lunge and bring the knee to the tricep. And then we'll flow from here. We'll do three-legged dog or whatever, and we'll move into our sequence. Second time round, I tell people we're going to jump back. Okay? So instead of stepping back, second time round, we'll do it like this. So it's a little jump. Okay. So it's just about thinking, what can I do to bring different things in? Okay. I've also done crow to warrior 3. Not warrior 3, warrior 1. Show you. So crow pose. Always, crow is normally chaturanga. So crow pose, I ask people to land their right foot and step their back foot into warrior 1. Okay, completely different. If they couldn't do that, they stayed in Melasana, turn their right foot in and step back into their warrior 1. So that was an option for the people who couldn't do crow. But people that could do crow, I gave them a bit of a challenge. Can you do this? Can you drop your one foot down and step the other foot back into warrior one? Okay, instead of always three-legged dog, warrior one. So it's just about thinking about different ways that you can move, different ways that you can get people to transition between poses. Doesn't come naturally it didn't for me for a long time. But I've told you about Jenny Rawlins. I've told you that she's got very, very nice little transitions that you can use. You can build those into your flow. Some of them are quite different. So often if I'm running out of ideas, I'll go and look at her Instagram and I'll try and find if I can use something that she's put on there. Also just looking at Instagram and seeing how other people move and transition. And I might, if I see something, I might not like exactly the way that they've done it, but I might think, oh, if I just change it a little bit like this, it works better for me, and that's how I'm going to teach it. So it's just a little bit of thinking about general movements and how you can make it a little bit more interesting instead of teaching the same way that everybody else does. Okay. As I said, without making it so complicated that nobody can do it, because then they're not going to come to your classes. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about any of that, or do you want to pick my brain about anything else? Anything you want to ask me about Vinyasa classes at the studios, or anything else? Any questions at all? Okay. Yes. Helene.
Yeah, I know that we shouldn't always demonstrate, we should cue. But a question I've always had about people who do the class with the rest of the classes, how do they manage to regulate their breathing while speaking? I'm always amazed that they don't run out of breath because they're doing the class I'm doing.
The teachers that do the class as well as
right.
teachers. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that is a good question, because number one, you shouldn't be doing the whole class with your students.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, you should be watching your students. This COVID has been a good example of that, because we've been teaching on Zoom. Teaching on Zoom, I have to do the whole class and I have to talk. Let me tell you, it is exhausting. It's not easy. And I'm not even doing it in heat. So for me to go, I have been now that we're back at the studios. So to do it in the heat, to do the whole class and to talk is very, very difficult. I'm sure my fitness has improved 5,000 times because I've had to do it. But in the beginning, it was very difficult. And I did find myself getting out of breath. And the thing that worries me is I'm doing the class, but I'm not breathing correctly. I'm not breathing, I'm talking, and it's totally messed up. So it does bother me a bit that I'm doing the whole class and I'm not actually breathing. I'm not doing yoga breathing. I'm talking and I'm wearing myself out in all sorts of ways. So it is exhausting. So those people, you should not, and you should not be practicing the whole class with your students.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
If there is a difficult transition, what I will do is I will walk in and I will say, guys, welcome. We're going to be doing a bit of a different transition today. I'm going to show you. And then when I get you there, we'll talk you through it and we'll do it together. Okay, so then I might demonstrate the transition at the beginning of class so that I don't have to do it with them. By the time we get there, I can just talk. That's fine, Zani. I can just talk them through it, and hopefully they've got an idea of where we're going. But you really shouldn't be doing the whole class with your students. It's not your practice. You should be watching your students, because you need to be cueing them verbally to fix things that are wrong. And also when we get allowed to do physical adjustments again, because we haven't been allowed to do it because of COVID, you also want to be physically adjusting your students. So I know in the beginning, when you first start teaching, it's very comfortable to be on your mat, but you need to get off your mat, because I promise you, it is so difficult to do the whole class and talk. It's very difficult.
Yeah, no, I know Laura and Taryn have also told us not to do that. But the reason I ask is it's just something that I've been curious about for a while, because I haven't had a yoga studio for many years. So I do most of my classes with a teacher online who demonstrates. And I'm always curious about just how she manages not to run out of breath. But the other thing that I've seen is I do Jiva Mukti classes, for instance.
Oh, yes.
And
Oh, cool.
they do, the Jiva Mukti teacher has a demo person, like now during COVID as well, with the online stuff. So she has a demo person with her in the room, and then she just, and that helps a lot.
Wow.
And I was thinking, like when we get to teach and like face to face again, it might be nice to have like one person is a bit more experienced, and then you can say, okay, look at so and so, and or maybe you so and so can just show us, and then the rest will know. Like that might help as well. But I am still curious about like how to regulate your breath when you're doing a full demo class.
Yeah. You can't. There's no breath regulation, and I promise you, it's worried me because I've often, and I've said it to people. I've said it to people at the studios, colleagues of mine. I've said, I'm worried about this because I'm not breathing properly. I'm doing the yoga class, but my breathing is not regulated at all. It's all over the show, and I'm out of breath towards the end because it's exhausting.
But I think there must be a trick to it, because when you speak on an exhale. So there has to be some kind of trick to like just making sure that you speak slowly enough so that
not so easy.
Good inhaling and all of that.
I promise you, it's not easy. It doesn't work like that. You can't regulate your inhales and your exhales. You can with some of the stuff, but it's very difficult. And you just find that it's you do get a little bit out of breath. It's very difficult to teach and talk at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what you sort of aim not to do in the beginning. Everybody does it. I also did it, absolutely. But the aim is, once you get your confidence, is to get off your mat. Sometimes the classes are so full at Yoga Spirit, we can fit 60 people in there. I cannot even, there's no space for me to demonstrate. I can't even walk around. I literally stand on a little patch of carpet at the entrance, and I cue the whole, I can't walk around, because if I walk, I'm going to get kicked by people doing downward facing dogs. That's how packed the class is. There's no space for me to move anywhere. So I can forget about demonstrating. I'm literally standing in one spot, and I'm cueing the whole class from one spot. So that is, and in a full class, that's what you have to do. You cannot demonstrate one single thing, because there's just no space for you. I can't even walk around because the class is so jam-packed. So the trick is to get off your mat.
I know Caroline had a question as well. But I just want to say one thing that actually does worry me, because I have a bulging disc in my lower back that acts up like only when I stand for long periods of time. So I would hate having to stand for a whole class. Like I wouldn't be able to do that. I'd have to do like walk around or something, but I just wouldn't be able to do that.
That's difficult. Then you probably would have to, I just don't know how you would do. Well, you could probably do it if they were doing cat and cow, and you didn't have a chance of being kicked by a three-legged dog or something. But it is difficult. Karen, you had a raised hand, but did Caroline want to ask something first? Okay, Caroline, yes. And then I'll come back to you, Karen. Yes, Caroline.
I just had a question about counterposing.
Yes.
I've been told that after each pose, obviously not in this teacher training, but I'm just curious as to where this comes from, this side. After each pose, that you should like have a counterpose. So let's say, for example, you go into full wheel and then you have to get into Paschimottanasana like straight afterwards, right? Is that something that applies in this style of vinyasa? I'm just, since you mentioned pose.
Good question. No, we don't counterpose after every single pose. No, we just, the counter poses are something that you do more towards the end, just to do the opposite to what you may have been doing in your class. And sometimes the counter pose, there is actually no counter pose, perhaps because you haven't done anything extreme. So you can just end it off in Jhana Shasana, forward fold, maybe a bridge. You can bring in a little bit of both. So the counter posing is not strictly, we don't counter pose after every pose. And I give you an example from shoulder stand. If you're doing Ashtanga, the counter pose to shoulder stand is fish pose, Matsyasana. Okay, I've very seldom have taught Matsuyasana from shoulder stand, which I don't like teaching anyway, but people do it. Believe you me, they do it. We normally just go into happy baby or constructive rest or something like that. So no, it's not strictly counter posing for every pose. No. Okay. Karen.
Talking about teaching, surely you
Yes.
must obviously teach beginners.
Yes.
And then what happens if you have a whole month of getting new beginners?
Okay, that's a good question. If I'm teaching a beginner class, I will demonstrate a lot more, but a beginner's class is a lot slower and it's a very simple. I mean, the most we do is hold horse pose for 5 breaths and that kills everybody. So it's easier to demonstrate and talk at the same time in a beginner's class because it's much slower. So yep, that you can manage to do, because unfortunately that with beginners they need to see what's going on. So I do demonstrate for beginners classes, but it's a lot slower, it's a lot easier, there's a lot less movement, we're not moving around as much as we do in a vinyasa or power vinyasa that gets taught at the studios. But that's a good question.
And then at what point, say after a month, would you start slacking off with some of those harder those simpler moves? So
you mean if I'm teaching beginners all the time?
Well,
if I'm teaching,
yeah.
You mean if I'm teaching a beginner's class all the time?
Yes.
Okay, no, I would keep the moves very simple each and every time, because there'll probably be somebody new that arrives each and every time. So if it is listed as a beginner's vinyasa, I keep the movements very simple. The most we do, as I said, is hold horse pose, or we try and do crow, and that's about it. So I might just bring in chair and maybe bring in a chair twist, as something a bit more difficult. But it's simple movements. It's nothing like we would do perhaps in a I mean, there would be no half moon or revolved half moon or anything like that. It would be just too difficult.
And is there an alternative to child's pose as a resting pose?
Good question. I like to give people, because men battle to do child's pose. I just say to them, if it's uncomfortable, then just put your forearms on the floor and just try and get comfy, because this is a little bit too deep. And then if that doesn't work for them, I tell them they can sit either in a kneeling seat or cross-legged. Everybody's going to have their eyes closed, so hopefully nobody's watching what anybody else is doing. But child's pose is uncomfortable, so good question. Yeah, I just let them put their forearms on the floor and maybe just not go so low and so deep, and that's an alternative for the men, because a lot of men can't do child's pose, and some people find it claustrophobic too. So yeah. Okay, does it answer your question? Okay, good. Okay, Zama, yes.
My question is, do you find out prior to the class whether it's going to be a beginner's class or intermediate and advanced class? And do you ever have a mixture of students where you have to now reorganize your sequence in order to be specific for those type of students you'll be having?
Yes. I have sometimes had a sequence in mind and have arrived to teach and have noticed, oh my gosh, there are so many beginners. Then I will try and I won't change the whole sequence, because I've got the sequence in my mind. I will just make it easier. So instead of doing half moon, probably the most complicated thing we'll do is triangle. I won't go into half moon. Or if I'm doing huge back bends, I won't do such huge back bends. We'll probably just do cobra, and maybe not even not many, and I won't do as many options for vinyasas or chaturangas. I'll just say just step back to down dog, so that it's a little bit easier for the beginners. But it is a good question, because I think it was a couple of weeks ago I arrived at Yoga Spirits, and I had a very strong class planned, and there were quite a few regular students, but don't ask me why that class there were a lot of beginners, and I just had to simplify it and leave some of the harder stuff out. So that also comes with practice, because just because you've got your sequence, that doesn't mean that that's going to work for every class. I'll give you another example. Students at Yoga Zone, we get a lot of foreigners. We get a lot of people that I don't really know as well as my regulars. Yoga Spirit is a lot of regulars. It's people who live in Constantia, so I sort of know that clientele very well. So I will have the same sequence that I teach the whole week. For Yoga Zone, I will make it a little bit easier because it's people that I don't know, it's foreigners, and maybe their yoga isn't that brilliant. For Yoga Spirit, where I know it's regulars and they're strong practitioners, I will make the sequence a little bit harder. So the same sequence, but instead of airplane, I'll make them do Warrior 3 because a Warrior 3 is harder. Okay, I won't do Half Moon, for example. Or maybe I'll leave it out at Yoga Zone, but I'll definitely add it in a Yoga Spirit. So it also depends on, you get to know your clientele, you get to know the people who are coming to your classes. Yoga Zone classes are also taught a little bit slower. Yoga Spirit classes are taught a little bit faster. So it's a little bit of modifications according to where you're teaching, how you're teaching, and getting to know what kind of people are arriving at your class. And I do get a whole mixture. And if I have a strong practice and there's a brand new beginner in my class, that person's just going to have to muddle along to the best of their ability. I will go and stand next to them and maybe help them with a halfway lift, or I'll go from high plank, I'll drop to my knees next to them, lower onto my tummy, do cobra. So I'm showing them as I'm going along, but I cannot spend my whole class teaching one beginner. So it's tricky because you do get a mixture in every single class. You do get a mixture, but I sort of change it if I see that there's, oh wow, this is a lot of beginners. I better just make the sequence a little bit easier. Okay.
So and do you find out, how do you find out that they're beginners or whatever? Is it like beforehand? Do they inform you at the studio, or you always know?
Beforehand, when you're greeting people, you're signing people in, and then somebody will say, oh, I haven't done yoga for 5 years, or oh, this is my first yoga class I've ever done, or they're brand new to the studio, because you need to get them to fill in the forms. So you know, then you can say to them, I always say, have you done yoga before? If it's a person that I don't know who's signing in the studio, have you done yoga before? If I get 20 of them that arrive and go, no, they haven't done yoga before, then I know, oh, okay, I better just make my sequence a little bit easier. So yeah, so it's finding out, it's asking questions beforehand, getting an idea of, if you can, who's going to be in your class. And so it is a little bit tricky because you need to have your sequence, but you need to be able to modify it if you need to. And that comes with practice. So in the beginning, I would keep my sequences quite simple. Before getting into more advanced stuff, just keep your sequences simple for your confidence, so that you have sort of a simple structure that you can go back to if you need to, if I can explain it that way. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, good.
And one last question, sorry.
No, I don't mind.
I just want to get your opinion. How do you handle if you can see a student is kind of struggling, but they're not saying so? Do you directly approach them, or
in the class?
And you just tell them to modify, in the class.
I'll give modifications. For example, if we're taking side plank, I'll say, if you are new to yoga, please lower your left shin, or whatever side it is, right shin to the floor. If they are really battling, I offer child's pose as an option to rest a little bit more often. So hopefully they will do it. If they're battling, hopefully they will go into child's pose. My regulars will be, most of them don't want to go into child's pose, so they won't listen anyway, unless I put them into child's pose so that everybody can have a break. But if I see that I've got somebody who's battling, I will say, remember, child's pose is an option for you. If you've lost your breath, if you're feeling like you've lost energy, please take a break in child's pose. Or I'll tell them beforehand. In actual fact, I do that quite often. If it's somebody new, I'll say to them, this isn't a beginner's class. You might find it a little bit tricky. We're going to start in a pose called child's pose. Please go back to that pose whenever you like, especially if you feel like you've run out of energy or you're battling to breathe. So I will try and tell them that even before they walk in, so that hopefully they know. So yeah, it's a little bit tricky, but I do try and tell beginners, I do warn them, because they can't, they don't know where they're going. They don't even know what a Warrior 2 is. So they're trying to look around. It really is difficult for them if it's not a beginner's class. So it is difficult. And so I will try and get them to be in child's pose when they need it, as often as they need it, because they need to have a break. Or I'll just say, just sit on your knees. But I prefer child's pose because otherwise people feel like you've got somebody watching you. You know, people that are practicing don't really want to have somebody that's sitting watching. Whereas child's pose, that person's not watching them. So child's pose is always a better option as a resting pose, rather than just sitting and watching what everybody else is doing. That makes sense.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Pleasure. Anybody else got anything else to ask? Okay. All right. I think that I have hopefully given you quite a bit of information. Yes. Oh, Charisse.
Just one last question. I was wondering if you've got any tips or advice on to how to memorize the sequences, because obviously it's a little bit tough.
Yes. Okay.
And especially with the queuing and everything, how would you say the best way is to do that?
So if I were you in the beginning, I would have a piece of paper or cue cards, and I would have my starting. How am I going to start? Write down those poses. Then I'm going to think about, okay, how am I going to build up my flow? Am I going to put sun A's and sun B's in? Write that down. Write down what comes next. Write down your major flow where you're working towards your peak pose. Write down your ending. Then practice the class yourself. That is, I mean, I still do that. If I think I've got amazing sequence, I still practice it myself to make sure that I know that it feels comfortable, number one. But by practicing it, you get it more into your brain. And then hopefully the cues will come a bit more naturally because you've got the sequence in your brain. I don't write down, and this is just weird, this is just me, I don't write down my sequences before I teach them. I will get on my mat, like this afternoon, I've got to plan my whole sequence for next week. I always plan a new sequence on a Sunday for the whole week, and I teach the same sequence the whole week. So I've got to plan this afternoon. So what I'll do is I'll think about, okay, what do I want to do? Do I want to do shoulders? Where do I want to move? And I'll get on my mat and I will literally just move, beginning, warming up, main parts, how am I going to end? All of that. I will put it together just by moving on my mat. I will just feel it out. I will just move. I'll then practice that sequence maybe 2 or 3 times. If I haven't got it in my head, I'll wake up early tomorrow morning and practice it again before I teach it. And after I've taught it, I will then go and write it down. That's me. I do it the other way around. But in the beginning, I would suggest you write down, starting my first part, my warm-up, my soft building of the flow. What am I going to do for my 2 flows? What can I add on to make it a bit more different, and how can I end? Write it down, but then it's always a good idea to practice it yourself, because when you do that, you get it into your brain. It definitely helps. Definitely. I still practice every single sequence I'm teaching before I teach it. I do it. And a couple of times, not just once. I do it 3 times. If I'm not sure, I might even do it 4 times, so that by the time I've done it, it's in my brain and I know where I'm going. But it is difficult, and we all make mistakes. I promise you, in the beginning, I used to muck things up or get stuck or not remember where I'm going. So keep your sequences simple in the beginning. Don't make them complicated, because the more complicated you make them, the more chance you've got of messing it up or forgetting where you're going. So until you get your confidence, keep your sequences simple. Okay. Anything else, guys? No? Anything else? Okay, so we're going to end about a half an hour earlier, which is fine. I hope that that's sort of given you some help, some information. It doesn't come easy. It takes practice. It takes experience. But the best advice I can give you is keep your sequences simple in the beginning. Give yourself time to build up your confidence with simple sequences before you start doing more advanced or more complicated sequences, so that you don't get lost, so that you can remember where you're going. Okay. And good luck. And And hopefully I'll be coming to some of your classes maybe one day. Okay, so that's, I promise you that I think I've given you any piece of advice that I could possibly think of. And it really just is about experience. Obviously, the more you teach, the easier it gets, the more confident you get. We all start off teaching on our mats, demonstrating or doing nearly the whole class. We've all done that. It takes confidence to get off your mat and just stand and cue. And that takes a while. So don't put too much pressure on yourself. Just let whatever's going to happen with your teaching, let it happen. You probably, I'm guaranteed you'll be on your mat when you first teach your first class and your second class and maybe even your third class. Okay, so it does take time to get off your mat. That's just from your confidence. I'm not an extrovert person at all. I don't like standing up. I don't like talking to crowds of people. The reason that I'm able to teach a yoga class where I can stand in front of 60 people and teach is because I think nobody's looking at me. I am holding the space. I am guiding the space, but nobody is looking at me. That's great. I can do this because it's much better than having a whole group of people who are looking at you. Okay, so they're not. They focus on your they're not center of attention like you would be if you were standing up making a speech. Okay, that's how I get it in my mind, and that's how I am able to do it because I'm not a very extrovert person at all. I hate being the center of attention. Okay, that's just me. So if you feel like that too, just remember it's not about you. They're not looking at you. They're focusing on their own. And as long you cue the inhalations and the exhalations correctly, and you hold the space with confidence, you will be absolutely fine. They will love it. Okay, that's all you need to do. Hey guys, have a beautiful rest of your Sunday. Hopefully you don't have any questions, but if you do, you can always just put them on the group. I don't mind answering. If it's something that you think will help everybody, then put it on the group. And if you want to ask me personally, my number's on there. You can ask me personally. I don't mind. Okay. All right, we're finishing a little bit earlier. Go and enjoy the rest of your Sunday. It's a beautiful, beautiful day if you're in Cape Town. So lots of love, and I will see you next week for Hot 26, which is completely different. Okay. Namaste. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Okay, see you next week. Okay, bye.
Bye.